The dust from the cattle drive still clung to Isaac Montgomery's skin when he made the decision that would change everything. Standing in front of his gilt-edged mirror in the master suite of his sprawling ranch house, staring at her reflection he barely recognized anymore beneath all the wealth and expectation. He had inherited the Montgomery fortune at 23, just 4 years ago, and in that time he had watched women transform the moment they learned his name, their eyes lighting with calculation rather than genuine feeling, their laughter becoming practiced and their touches strategic. So when he heard about the new schoolteacher arriving in Boise, Idaho in the spring of 1883, a young woman named Clara Nichols, who had come west to escape some unnamed heartbreak back in Pennsylvania, Isaac decided to meet her as someone else entirely, someone with nothing to offer but himself. He stripped away the fine wool jacket, the silk vest, the polished leather boots that cost more than most men earned in a month. From the back of his wardrobe, he pulled out clothes he had not worn since his father was alive, simple cotton and worn denim that smelled faintly of cedar and memory. His hands trembled slightly as he buttoned the faded shirt, and he wondered if he was making a fool of himself, if this plan was the product of loneliness rather than wisdom. But he had watched his father marry for love, had seen the way his mother looked at his father even when they had nothing, and he wanted that fierce, uncomplicated devotion for himself. The morning, Clara Nichols stepped off the stagecoach in Boise. She carried everything she owned in a single worn trunk and a carpet bag that had belonged to her grandmother. The town stretched before her in shades of brown and gray, wooden buildings lining a wide main street where horses stood tied to hitching posts and men in dusty clothes moved with purpose between the general store and the saloon. The mountains rose in the distance, still capped with snow despite the warming spring air, and Clara felt something loosen in her chest at the sight of all that open space. Philadelphia had felt like a cage after Thomas had married her cousin instead, after the whispers had started about the poor Nichols girl who had been so publicly humiliated. Here, no one knew her story. Here she could begin again. Miss Nichols. A stout woman with iron-gray hair approached, her face weathered but kind. "I'm Martha Henderson, president of the school board. Welcome to Boise." Clara shook her hand, grateful for the warmth in Martha's voice. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mrs. Henderson. I am eager to begin. The schoolhouse is just down the road. Small, I am afraid, but the children are good students, most of them. We have arranged for you to board with the Reverend and Mrs. Talbot. They have a spare room, and Mrs. Talbot is an excellent cook." Martha's eyes traveled over Clara's simple gray traveling dress, taking in the careful mending at the cuffs, the faded ribbon at her collar. "You will do just fine here, dear. We do not stand on ceremony in Boise." The schoolhouse was indeed small, a single room with rough wooden benches and a slate board that had seen better days. But sunlight poured through the windows, and someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the desk, and Clara felt something like hope stirring as she unpacked her few books and arranged them carefully on the shelf. She was 21 years old, and her life was not over, no matter what the gossips back home believed. Isaac watched from across the street, leaning against the post outside the feed store with his hat pulled low. He had heard the schoolteacher was pretty, but the word had not prepared him for the reality of Clara Nichols. She moved with a quiet grace, her dark hair pulled back in a simple knot, her profile delicate but determined as she swept the schoolhouse steps. There was something in the set of her shoulders that spoke of recent pain, a guardedness in her eyes when she looked up and noticed the townspeople passing by. He wondered what had driven her west, what she was running from or toward. "That is the new teacher," a voice said beside him, and Isaac turned to find Frank Cooper, who worked occasionally at his ranch when extra hands were needed. Frank did not know Isaac owned the ranch, believing him to be just another cowhand. It was a fiction Isaac had carefully maintained, paying his foreman Henry to hire him under a false name when he wanted to work alongside the men. Pretty little thing. Half the unmarried men in town are already planning their proposals. Isaac felt an unexpected flare of irritation. She just arrived. That is why they are planning, not proposing. Frank laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. You interested, Montgomery, or are you still saving your pennies? The false name felt strange on his ears, but Isaac nodded. Maybe. She seems like she wants to be left alone, though. Women always want to be left alone until they do not. Frank tipped his hat and headed into the feed store, leaving Isaac watching Clara disappear inside the schoolhouse. He waited 3 days before approaching her, letting her settle into the rhythm of the town. He learned her habits by observation, the way she took a morning walk before school started, the way she lingered in the general store examining the sparse selection of books, the way she smiled politely at everyone but kept her distance. On the 4th day, he timed his own walk to intersect with hers just as the sun was rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Morning, he said, touching his hat brim. Clara looked up, startled. She had been watching a hawk circle overhead, her shawl wrapped tight against the spring chill. Good morning. I am Isaac Montgomery. The false name came easier now, though he kept his own first name and initial. I work at one of the ranches outside town. Clara Nichols. She studied him with those careful eyes, taking in his worn clothes, the calluses on his hands. You are out early. So are you. A smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. I like the quiet before the day begins. It is easier to think. They walked together for a few minutes in silence, their footsteps soft on the dirt road. Isaac found himself acutely aware of her presence beside him, the way the morning light caught in her hair, the faint scent of lavender soap. He wanted to ask her 1,000 questions, but something in her demeanor suggested she would bolt if pressed too hard. The mountains are beautiful, Clara said finally, her voice soft. I have never seen anything like them. You are from back east, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. She glanced at him, then away. It is very different here. Do you like it? She considered the question seriously. I do not know yet. It is so open, so much sky. Sometimes it feels like I could just disappear into all this space. Is that what you want, to disappear? Clara's steps faltered and Isaac cursed himself for pushing too far too fast. But then she looked at him directly, and he saw something raw and honest in her expression. Sometimes. Is that terrible? No, he said quietly. I think everyone wants to disappear sometimes. To step away from who people think we are and just be ourselves. She studied him for a long moment, and Isaac felt the weight of her gaze, the intelligence behind it. You are not what I expected from a cowhand. What did you expect? More roughness, less philosophy. The smile came again, warmer this time. I should get to the schoolhouse. The children will be arriving soon. Can I walk with you again tomorrow? Clara hesitated, and Isaac held his breath, aware that everything balanced on this moment. Then she nodded, a small dip of her chin. Tomorrow. The walks became a ritual. Every morning, Isaac would meet Clara just as the sun rose, and they would walk the perimeter of the town, their conversations growing deeper and more personal with each passing day. She told him about her family, about her father who had died when she was 16 and left them with nothing but debts, about her mother who had taken in sewing to keep them fed, about her younger brother who was apprenticed to a printer and dreamed of starting his own newspaper. She did not tell him about Thomas, not at first, but Isaac could sense the shadow of someone in her past, a hurt she had not yet learned to name. He told her about growing up on a ranch, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the feel of open country under a horse's hooves. He did not tell her about the fortune, about the sprawling main house and the dozens of employees, about the business interests that stretched from Idaho to California. He told himself it was not really lying, just selective truth, but guilt gnawed at him sometimes in the quiet moments. "What do you want, Isaac?" Clara asked him one morning as they sat on a fallen log overlooking the valley. It had been 2 weeks since they started walking together, and something had shifted between them, an ease that felt both thrilling and dangerous. "From your life, I mean. What do you dream about?" No one had asked him that question since his father died. Everyone assumed they knew what Isaac Montgomery wanted, what any man with his wealth and prospects must want. But Clara did not know about any of that, and she looked at him now with genuine curiosity, waiting for a real answer. "A family," he said after a moment. "Not just children, though I would like those too, but a real partnership, someone who chooses me because of who I am, not what I can provide. Someone who would love me the same whether I had everything or nothing." Clara's expression softened. "That is a good dream. What about you? What do you want?" She pulled her shawl tighter, her gaze distant. "I used to think I wanted security. A comfortable home, a respectable husband, a place in society. But I learned that those things do not matter much if the person you are with does not truly see you." Her voice dropped. "I want to be known, really known, and loved anyway." Isaac felt something crack open in his chest. "You should be." She turned to look at him, and the air between them felt charged with possibility. "Should I?" "Yes." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, and he wrapped his own around them, offering warmth. "You should be loved exactly as you are, Clara Nichols. Any man who did not see that was a fool." Her breath caught. "How did you know there was someone?" "I guessed. You have the look of someone who left pieces of herself behind." His name was Thomas. The words came quietly, like a confession. "I thought we had an understanding. I thought after 5 years of courtship he would finally ask my father for my hand. Instead, he married my cousin Rebecca. She had a dowry. I had nothing to offer." Isaac felt anger surge through him, hot and immediate. "Then he was worth nothing, no matter what he had." Clara laughed, but it sounded close to tears. "I felt so foolish. Everyone knew. Everyone pitied me. I could not bear it anymore, so when I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Idaho, I applied the same day." She looked down at their joined hands. "I thought distance would make it stop hurting. But sometimes I wake up and forget where I am, and I reach for a life I never really had." "Give it time," Isaac said gently. "Time and new memories, better ones." She looked up at him then, really looked, and something passed between them that felt like recognition. "You make me believe that is possible." He wanted to kiss her. The urge was so strong it made his hands shake, but he held himself back, knowing it was too soon, knowing she needed time to heal and he needed to tell her the truth. But the truth felt impossible in that moment, a grenade that would shatter this fragile, perfect thing growing between them. The town dance was held on the last Saturday of the month in the church hall, and Martha Henderson made it clear that Clara was expected to attend. "It is important for the teacher to be part of the community," she said firmly when Clara tried to demur. "Besides, you have been here nearly a month. It is time you met more people properly." Clara wore her best dress, a modest blue cotton that had been her mother's, and spent an embarrassing amount of time on her hair before giving up and leaving it in a simple braid down her back. She had not been to a dance since Thomas's engagement party, where she had smiled until her face ached and left early with a headache that was not entirely feigned. The thought of facing a room full of strangers, of making polite conversation and deflecting questions about her past, made her stomach knot with anxiety. But then she arrived and saw Isaac standing near the refreshment table, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt with his hair still damp from washing. And relief flooded through her so powerfully, she almost laughed. He saw her at the same moment and his whole face changed, lighting with a smile that made her heart skip. He crossed the room in a few long strides, ignoring the curious looks from the other townspeople. "You came," he said. "Mrs. Henderson gave me no choice." Clara glanced around at the assembled crowd, recognizing some of the parents of her students, some of the shopkeepers she passed daily. "I do not know anyone here. You know me. I do." The words felt more significant than they should, weighted with the intimacy of those morning walks, the secrets they had shared. "Will you dance with me?" Isaac looked momentarily panicked. "I am not very good." "Neither am I. We can be terrible together." He laughed and offered his arm, and Clara took it, feeling the solid warmth of him through the fabric. The fiddler struck up a reel, and couples moved onto the floor, and Isaac led her into the pattern with more grace than he had claimed. He held her carefully, respectfully, his hand light at her waist, and Clara found herself relaxing into the movement, letting the music carry her. "You lied," she said. "You are a good dancer." "My mother insisted I learn. She said a man who could not dance was only half civilized." He spun her carefully, then pulled her back. "I have not danced in years, though, not since she died." "I am sorry." Clara had noticed the way his voice changed when he mentioned his mother, the grief that was still fresh despite the years. "You must miss her terribly. Every day. She was the best person I knew." Isaac's eyes met hers, dark and serious. "She would have liked you." The words hung between them, and Clara felt something bloom in her chest, warm and fragile as new leaves. "I would have liked to meet her." They danced 2 more dances, and then Isaac fetched them both cups of punch and they retreated to the corner, watching the other couples spin past. Frank Cooper asked Clara for a dance, and she agreed out of politeness, but she found herself comparing his loose grip and inattentive conversation to Isaac's careful attention, the way Isaac looked at her like she was the only person in the room. When the dance ended, she excused herself and returned to Isaac's side, feeling like she was coming home. "You are popular," Isaac said, and she heard something in his voice that might have been jealousy. "I do not want to be popular. I want to be here with you." His expression shifted, vulnerability and hope mixing together. "Clara, will you walk me home?" She interrupted before he could say whatever he was going to say, suddenly afraid of the intensity building between them. "It is getting late." The night air was cool and sharp after the warmth of the hall, and Clara breathed deeply, trying to settle her racing heart. Isaac walked beside her in silence, and she was acutely aware of the space between them, the way their hands hung close but not touching. The Talbot house was only 5 blocks away, and Clara found herself walking slower, not wanting the evening to end. "Thank you," she said when they reached the gate, "for dancing with me, for making tonight bearable." It was more than bearable. Isaac reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers gentle. "It was the best night I have had in years." Clara's breath caught. She could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint scent of soap and leather and something essentially him. "Isaac, I am falling for you," he said quietly. "I know it has only been a month. I know you came here to heal from someone else. But I need you to know. I cannot pretend any more that these walks are just friendly, that seeing you is not the best part of my day." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She should be careful, should protect herself, should remember the pain Thomas had caused. But when she looked at Isaac, all she felt was certainty, a rightness that scared her with its intensity. "I am falling for you too," she whispered. He exhaled like he had been holding his breath for hours. Can I court you? Properly, I mean, not just morning walks, but real courtship. Yes. The word came easily, naturally, like breathing. Yes, Isaac, I would like that very much. He smiled, bright and unreserved, and then he leaned down and kissed her forehead, soft as a prayer. Good night, Clara. Good night. She watched him walk away until he disappeared into the darkness, then touched her forehead where his lips had been, feeling like her life had just tilted onto a new axis. The courtship unfolded over the warm Idaho summer. Isaac appeared every Sunday after church to walk Clara home, carrying her Bible and asking about her week. He brought her wildflowers he picked on his rides, bouquets of lupine and Indian paintbrush that she pressed between the pages of her books. He attended the school's end-of-year recital and applauded louder than anyone when her students performed their carefully rehearsed poems. He fixed the loose board on the schoolhouse steps and mended the window that had been stuck since winter, his hands capable and sure. Clara found herself thinking about him constantly, distracted during lessons by memories of his laugh, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the warmth of his hand in hers. She wrote long letters to her mother, trying to describe what she felt, but words seemed inadequate for the happiness that had taken root in her chest. Thomas felt like a story someone had told her long ago, distant and unreal compared to the solid presence of Isaac in her life. They had their first real fight on a scorching July afternoon when Clara mentioned wanting to send some of her salary home to help her mother. "How much are you sending?" Isaac asked, and Clara heard something strange in his voice, a tension that had not been there before. "Half. My room and board are covered, and I do not need much for myself." "Half your salary." Isaac stood abruptly from the bench where they had been sitting in the shade of the schoolhouse. "Clara, that is barely anything. You will have nothing left for emergencies, for clothes, for anything you might want. My mother needs it more than I do." Clara felt her defenses rise, old shame mixing with new irritation. Not all of us have the luxury of keeping our earnings for ourselves. "I am not saying you should not help your family. I am saying you should not sacrifice everything for them. That is easy to say when you do not have anyone depending on you." The words came out sharper than she intended, and she saw Isaac flinch. "I am sorry, I did not mean. It is fine." His voice was flat. "You are right, I do not understand." They stood in awkward silence, and Clara felt the first real crack in their perfect summer. "Isaac, I should go, I have work tomorrow." He walked away without kissing her goodbye, without the usual promises to see her soon, and Clara watched him go with a sick feeling in her stomach. He did not come the next morning for their walk, or the morning after that. Clara threw herself into preparing for the new school year, trying not to watch the sunrise alone, trying not to feel the absence of him like a physical ache. She told herself she had been right, that she had every right to manage her own money, but doubt crept in during the sleepless nights. Maybe she had been too harsh. Maybe she should have explained better about the debts, about the guilt she carried for leaving while her mother struggled alone. On the third day, she saw him in town, and their eyes met across the street. Isaac looked like he had not slept either, dark circles under his eyes, his expression haunted. Clara took a step toward him, ready to apologize, ready to bridge the gap between them, but a freight wagon rolled past, and when it cleared, he was gone. She cried that night for the first time since coming to Idaho, muffling the sound in her pillow so Mrs. Talbot would not hear. She had been so careful with her heart, so determined not to get hurt again, and yet here she was, devastated by 3 days of silence from a cowhand who worked for wages and wore mended shirts and had nothing to offer but himself. Except that had been enough. More than enough. He had been everything. The knock came just after dawn. Clara was already awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to muster the energy to face another day, when she heard the soft rap on the door downstairs. Mrs. Talbot's voice, surprised but pleased. Then footsteps on the stairs and a gentler knock on her bedroom door. "Miss Clara, you have a visitor." She pulled on her robe and went downstairs to find Isaac standing in the Talbots' modest parlor, hat in hand, looking nervous and determined. Mrs. Talbot had discreetly vanished into the kitchen, leaving them alone. "I am sorry," they both said at the same time, then laughed shakily. "You first," Isaac said. "I should not have snapped at you. You were only concerned for me, and I threw your care back in your face." Clara twisted her hands together. "The money, my family, it is complicated, but I should have explained instead of lashing out. No, I am sorry. I was pushing when I should have listened. Your money, your choices, they are yours to make." Isaac took a step closer. "I have been miserable without you, Clara. These 3 days felt like 3 years. I was miserable too." She closed the distance between them and took his hands, feeling the rightness of the connection settle back into place. "Let us not fight like that again. Let us talk instead. I promise." He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her, and Clara melted into the embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "I have something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you from the beginning." Clara's heart skipped, anxiety prickling at the back of her neck. "What is it?" Isaac opened his mouth, then closed it, conflict clear on his face. I am not good at talking about difficult things. My father always said I kept too much inside, but you deserve honesty from me. Then be honest." She pulled back enough to look up at him, searching his face. "What is it, Isaac? Are you married? Running from the law? What could be so terrible?" "Nothing like that." He took a deep breath. I care about you so much, and I am terrified of doing something that will make you leave. You have become the most important person in my life, Clara. I do not know what I would do if I lost you." The confession was so raw, so vulnerable, that Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "You are not going to lose me. I am falling in love with you, Isaac Montgomery. I am terrified too, but I am not running, not from this. You are falling in love with me." His voice cracked on the words. "Yes, completely and irrevocably." She smiled up at him, feeling lighter than she had in days. "Is that all right?" "It is more than all right." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "I am falling in love with you too. I have been since that first morning walk when you talked about disappearing into the sky." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Clara kissed him back, thinking that she had never felt so safe, so seen, so cherished in her entire life. Whatever he had been trying to tell her could wait. This, the two of them together, was all that mattered. But Isaac's secret weighed on him more with each passing day. He knew he needed to tell Clara the truth, knew that every moment of delay was another lie of omission, but the words stuck in his throat every time he tried. How could he explain that he had been lying about who he was for months? That the humble cowhand she had fallen for was actually one of the wealthiest men in Idaho? That he had courted her under false pretenses, testing her, making sure she loved him for himself and not his money? When he put it like that, even in his own mind it sounded terrible. Manipulative. Cruel, even though that had never been his intention. He had just wanted to be known without the filter of his fortune, wanted to find someone who would love Isaac the man rather than Montgomery the millionaire. And he had found her. Clara was everything he had dreamed of and more, smart and kind and resilient, carrying her past hurts with grace while still being brave enough to love again. She deserved better than his deception. He decided to tell her on her birthday in August. He would take her out to the ranch, show her the truth of his life, and pray that she would understand why he had hidden it. He planned the whole day in his mind, rehearsing the words, trying to find a way to explain that would not make him sound like a complete scoundrel. But then Clara told him she had already made plans with some of the other women in town, and his carefully constructed confession fell apart. He would have to find another time, another way. September came, and with it the start of the new school year. Clara threw herself into teaching, energized by a classroom full of eager students and the routine of lessons and lunch pails and chalk-dusty hands. Isaac continued his visits, his courtship, the morning walks that had become as essential to Clara as breathing. But there was something between them now, a tension she could not quite name, moments when Isaac seemed about to speak and then stopped himself, his expression troubled. "Are you happy?" she asked him one evening as they sat on her front porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. School had been particularly challenging that day, one of the older boys acting out and disrupting the entire class, and Clara felt drained and uncertain. "Of course I am happy." Isaac took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Why would you ask that? You seem distant lately, preoccupied." She studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes always looked somewhere else when he was thinking hard. "If there is something wrong, I wish you would tell me." "There is nothing wrong. Work has been busy, that is all." It was not the truth, not entirely, and Clara felt it like a stone in her chest. But she did not push, afraid of what she might uncover, afraid of losing this fragile happiness they had built together. So she squeezed his hand and let the lie sit between them, hoping that whatever Isaac was hiding, it was not enough to destroy them. In October, Martha Henderson mentioned that the school board had received a generous donation that would pay for new books and supplies. "From the Montgomery ranch," she said, beaming. "Old Mr. Montgomery passed a few years back, but his son has continued the family's charitable tradition. Such a fine young man, even if he is a bit reclusive." Clara felt something cold slither down her spine. Montgomery. "Yes, the Montgomery Ranch, largest in the county. They own half the land from here to the mountains." Martha sorted through the supplies that had arrived with the donation, clearly delighted. "I heard young Isaac Montgomery is quite the catch, though he does not come into town much. All the society mothers have been trying to match him with their daughters for years." Isaac Montgomery. The same name as her Isaac, but that had to be a coincidence. Montgomery was not an uncommon name, and her Isaac worked for wages, lived in the bunkhouse, wore patched clothes. He could not possibly be the wealthy rancher Martha was describing. Could he? Clara felt sick. She excused herself and spent the rest of the day in a daze, teaching mechanically while her mind spun in circles. It was impossible. Isaac would have told her. He had had months to mention if he was secretly a millionaire, had plenty of opportunities to explain. They had talked about everything, shared their dreams and fears and histories. He would not have lied about something so fundamental. But doubt gnawed at her, persistent and poisonous. She thought about the way Isaac spoke, the education evident in his word choices, the books he referenced. She thought about his hands, calloused, yes, but well kept, his teeth straight and white in a time when most working men had lost several. She thought about the moments when he seemed about to confess something, the guilt that sometimes flickered in his eyes. She needed to know. The not knowing would drive her mad. That evening, instead of waiting for Isaac at the schoolhouse, Clara walked to the general store and asked the proprietor, Mr. Jameson, about the Montgomery Ranch. "Looking for work?" Jameson asked, then flushed. "Pardon me, Miss Nichols. That was thoughtless. I am just curious. A student mentioned the ranch and I realized I know very little about the area." "Well, the Montgomery Ranch is the biggest in these parts. Old Thomas Montgomery built it up from nothing, and when he passed, his son Isaac inherited the whole thing. Quite a fortune, from what I hear. Cattle, timber, mining interests. The boy is only 27, but he runs it all himself, sharp as they come. Clara's vision blurred at the edges. What does he look like? Isaac Montgomery, I mean. Jameson scratched his chin. Tall fellow, dark hair. Keeps to himself mostly, but decent enough when he comes to town. Why do you ask? Just curious, Clara repeated faintly. She purchased a tin of tea she did not need and walked back to the Talbot house in a fog, her mind refusing to accept what her heart already knew. Isaac had lied to her. For months he had lied, had courted her under false pretenses while she poured out her heart, while she told him about Thomas, and the humiliation of being valued only for money she did not have. He had let her talk about her fears of being used, had held her and promised to love her as she was, all while hiding the fact that he was exactly the kind of man she had learned not to trust. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Thomas had done. Thomas had been thoughtless, selfish, but at least he had been honest about his priorities. Isaac had deliberately deceived her, had tested her like she was some sort of experiment, had stolen the choice of whether to be with someone wealthy, whether to risk that kind of relationship again. She did not sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, rage and heartbreak warring in her chest. Part of her wanted to believe there was an explanation, some reason that would make it all right. But what reason could possibly justify months of lies? What excuse could make it acceptable that he had hidden something so fundamental about who he was? By morning, Clara had made a decision. She would confront him. She would demand the truth. And then she would decide whether the man she loved had ever really existed at all. Isaac knew something was wrong the moment he saw Clara waiting by the schoolhouse. She stood rigid, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale and set in lines he had never seen before. His stomach dropped, instinct screaming danger before his mind could catch up. "Clara, is it true?" Her voice was cold, so different from the warmth he was used to that he actually flinched. "Are you Isaac Montgomery, the millionaire rancher?" The world tilted. Of all the ways he had imagined telling her, this was the worst, her finding out from someone else, the betrayal fresh and raw before he could explain. "Yes," she made a sound like he had struck her. "Yes, just yes, not I can explain or there has been a terrible mistake. Just yes. I was going to tell you. I have been trying to tell you for weeks. I just did not know how." "How about the truth?" Clara's eyes blazed, tears gathering but not falling. "How about that first morning when I told you my name and you told me yours? How about any of the dozens of times we talked about trust and honesty and being truly known? I wanted you to know me, the real me, not the money and expectations." Isaac stepped toward her and she stepped back, the rejection like a knife between his ribs. "Everyone who knows about the Montgomery fortune, they see me differently. They want things from me. I just wanted to meet you as myself without all the rest of it." "You wanted to test me, you mean, to see if I was a gold digger like all those other women." Her voice broke. "I told you what Thomas did to me. I told you how it felt to be valued only for what I could provide. And all along you were doing the same thing, weighing and measuring, deciding if I was good enough to love the real you. No, that is not how it was." "Then how was it, Isaac? Explain to me how lying for months was actually some noble gesture." Clara laughed bitterly. "I said yes to you, to the man I thought you were, the man with nothing but himself to offer. I fell in love with someone who does not even exist. He does exist. I am still me, Clara. The money does not change who I am inside, but it changes everything else." She wrapped her arms tighter, like she was holding herself together by force. "It changes that you lied, that you made decisions for me about what I should know, that you robbed me of the choice to be with you with full knowledge of who you are." Isaac felt panic rising, everything he had feared coming true in the worst possible way. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong, but my feelings for you are real, Clara. Everything we shared was real. Was it? Or was it just part of your experiment? Tears finally spilled over, tracking down her cheeks. Did you laugh about it with your friends? The poor schoolteacher who fell for the millionaire in rags? I would never. Clara, you have to believe me. I never mocked you. I love you. I do not know what I believe anymore. She swiped at her tears, angry and grieving all at once. I need you to leave. I cannot look at you right now. Please let me explain properly. Let me show you the ranch, show you my life, and you will see it is not that different from what you thought. Everything is different. Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. I thought you were someone who understood what it was like to have nothing, someone who valued me as an equal. But you were slumming, playing at being poor while your fortune waited at home. We were never equals, Isaac. You just let me think we were. The words hit like bullets, each one finding its mark. Isaac wanted to argue, to make her see that he had never thought of it that way, that he had always seen her as his equal and more. But looking at her face, the devastation written there, he knew nothing he said would matter right now. I am sorry, he said quietly. I am sorrier than you will ever know, but I do love you, Clara. That was never a lie. Please go. She turned away, facing the schoolhouse, her back straight and unforgiving. Just go. Isaac stood frozen for a moment, wanting to say more to fix this somehow. But there was nothing he could say that would undo the damage, no words that would erase months of deception. So he walked away, each step in agony, knowing he had destroyed the best thing in his life through his own cowardice and pride. Behind him, Clara waited until she heard his footsteps fade before she finally let herself collapse against the schoolhouse wall, sobs shaking her whole body. She had been right to guard her heart. She had known better than to trust in love and happy endings. But somehow Isaac had slipped past her defenses, had made her believe again, and the fall was so much worse because she had let herself hope. The town buzzed with gossip within a day. Someone had seen the confrontation outside the schoolhouse, had watched Clara crying and Isaac walking away looking shattered. The truth came out in pieces. The millionaire who had posed as a common cowhand, the teacher who had been deceived, the courtship that had been built on lies. Opinion was divided. Some thought it romantic, a wealthy man trying to find true love. Others thought it cruel, manipulative, a rich man playing games with a woman's heart. Clara held her head high and ignored it all. She taught her classes, completed her duties, and spoke to no one about what had happened. Martha Henderson tried to broach the subject once, kindly offering an ear if Clara needed to talk, but Clara had politely declined. What was there to say? She had been a fool, and now she was paying the price. At least this time she had the comfort of distance. No one here had known her before, had witnessed years of her humiliation. She could leave at the end of the school year and start fresh somewhere else again. The thought exhausted her. Isaac did not attempt to contact her directly, though gifts appeared regularly, books she had mentioned wanting, fabric for a new dress, a warm coat for the coming winter. Clara returned them all, her notes brief and cold. She did not want his money or his guilt. She just wanted to be left alone to stitch her heart back together in peace. But Boise was a small town, and avoiding each other completely was impossible. She saw him sometimes across the street, looking haggard and miserable, his clothes now fine and obviously expensive. He always looked like he wanted to approach her, but he never did, respecting her request for distance even as it clearly killed him. Clara told herself she did not care. Told herself that the sight of him did not make her chest ache, that she did not lie awake remembering the feel of his arms around her, the sound of his laugh, the way he had looked at her like she was precious beyond measure. She almost believed it. October bled into November, and the first snow fell early, dusting the mountains and making the morning air bite with cold. Clara still took her morning walks, though they felt hollow without Isaac beside her. She walked alone through the frozen streets, watching her breath fog in the air, remembering how he used to try to make her laugh on these walks, how he would point out animal tracks in the mud or tell her stories about the cattle drives. She missed him. God help her, she missed him desperately, even through the anger and betrayal. She missed the man she thought she knew, and she grieved for the relationship that had never been quite real. Sometimes she wondered if she was being too harsh, if she should hear him out properly, give him a chance to explain. But then she would remember the months of lies, the fundamental dishonesty that had colored everything between them, and her resolve would harden again. She could not be with someone she did not trust, and she did not know if she would ever be able to trust Isaac Montgomery again. The first real storm hit in mid-November, a howling blizzard that shut down the town for 3 days. Clara was trapped in the Talbot house, watching the snow pile against the windows and feeling the cold seep through the walls despite the fire. She helped Mrs. Talbot with cooking and mending, and she tried not to think about Isaac alone in his big ranch house, wondering if he was warm enough, if he was eating properly. It was not her concern anymore. On the 3rd day, there was a pounding on the door. Mr. Talbot answered it to find Frank Cooper, the man who had worked with Isaac, looking frantic and half-frozen. "The schoolhouse," he gasped. "Roof collapsed under the snow. We need everyone who can help to salvage what we can before it all gets ruined." Clara bundled up immediately, pulling on every layer she owned. The schoolhouse was her responsibility, her students' futures stored in those books and supplies. She could not let it all be destroyed. The walk to the schoolhouse was brutal, wind cutting through her clothes and snow stinging her face. But when she arrived, she found dozens of townspeople already there, digging through the wreckage, trying to save what they could. And at the center of it all, directing the efforts and lifting debris with his own hands, was Isaac. He saw her arrive and their eyes met across the ruins of the schoolhouse. For a moment, everything else fell away. The cold, the destruction, the months of hurt. They just looked at each other, and Clara saw in his face the same aching loneliness she felt every day. Then someone called his name, needed his help with a heavy beam, and the moment broke. Isaac turned away, and Clara joined the salvage effort, working alongside people who had become her neighbors and friends. They worked for hours, rescuing books and slates, desks and benches, carrying them to the church hall where they could be dried and assessed. The work was hard and cold, but there was something comforting about it too, the community coming together in crisis, everyone working toward the same goal. As the sun set and the worst of the salvage was complete, Martha Henderson gathered everyone in the church hall and served hot coffee and soup. Clara stood near the stove trying to thaw her frozen fingers when Isaac approached. "You should go home and get warm," he said quietly. "You are shaking. So are you." It was the first words they had exchanged in weeks, and Clara felt the strange intimacy of it, the familiar concern in his voice that had not changed despite everything. "I am used to the cold." Isaac wrapped his hands around his own coffee cup, looking down at it rather than at her. "The school will need to be rebuilt. I have already spoken to Martha about funding the construction. It will be better than before, stronger, properly insulated. Of course you have." Clara did not mean it to sound bitter, but it came out that way regardless. The great Isaac Montgomery, solving problems with his money, he flinched. "I am just trying to help. I know." And she did know, could see it in the tired lines of his face, the way he had worked as hard as anyone despite his wealth. Whatever else he had done, he did care about the community, about her students. "Thank you. The children need a school. They need a teacher more. Isaac finally looked at her, and Clara saw the rawness in his eyes, the barely healed wounds. Are you staying? After this year, I mean. Or will you leave? She had been asking herself the same question for weeks. I do not know. I hope you stay. The words were soft, almost too quiet to hear over the bustle of the hall. Boise is better with you in it. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the crowd, and Clara stood alone by the stove, feeling the warmth seep back into her body but not into her heart. The schoolhouse reconstruction began immediately, and Isaac threw himself into the project with an intensity that worried his foreman Henry. He was at the site every day, working alongside the hired carpenters, staying long past sunset to ensure everything was done right. He barely slept, barely ate, driving himself to exhaustion because when he stopped moving, all he could think about was Clara. He had never felt pain like this. Losing his parents had been devastating, but that was the natural order of things, the inevitable grief of time passing. Losing Clara was different. It was self-inflicted, a wound he had carved into his own chest through his own stupidity and pride. And the worst part was knowing she was right. He had been testing her, had hidden behind a false identity because he was too afraid to be vulnerable, too damaged by past experience to simply trust that someone could love him as he was. But Clara was not like those other women. He had known that from the first morning walk, from the way she looked at the mountains like they could save her, from the vulnerability in her eyes when she talked about wanting to be truly known. She would have loved him regardless of the money, would have chosen him in rags or riches. And he had robbed her of that choice, had stolen her agency because of his own fears. He did not know how to fix it, did not know if it could be fixed. But he kept building the schoolhouse, kept showing up day after day, because at least this was something he could do for her. Some small way he could prove that his care had been real even if his name had been false. December arrived with clear, cold skies and the news that the schoolhouse would be ready by Christmas. It was beautiful, better than it had been before, with a stove that actually kept the whole room warm and windows that let in light without letting in drafts. There were new desks and a new slate board, shelves full of books donated by people across the county after word spread about the collapse. It was a gift to the children of Boise, a gift to education, a gift to Clara. She stood in the empty schoolhouse on the day before Christmas, looking at everything Isaac had built, and felt her anger finally begin to crack. He had been wrong to lie. That had not changed, would never change. But his care for her, his love, maybe that had been real after all. She thought about the months they had spent together, the conversations and laughter and quiet moments. Had all of that been false? Or had the only lie been his name and circumstances, while the man himself had been genuine? She did not know. But standing in this schoolhouse that he had rebuilt with his own hands, she thought maybe she wanted to find out. Christmas Eve, Clara attended the service at the church, sitting with the Talbots and singing carols in the candlelight. The Reverend spoke about forgiveness, about the courage it took to extend grace, and Clara felt the words sink into her heart like seeds. She had been wronged, yes, but she had wronged too in her time. Had she not hidden things from Thomas, had not pretended to be fine when she was not, had not let pride keep her from admitting how much his actions had hurt. Everyone carried their own wounds, their own fears that made them act in ways they later regretted. Was she brave enough to risk being hurt again? Brave enough to have the conversation she had been avoiding, to really listen to Isaac's side of the story? After the service, she walked alone through the snowy streets, not ready to return to the Talbot house yet. The town was quiet, families gathered in their homes, smoke rising from chimneys into the star-filled sky. She found herself walking toward the edge of town, toward the road that led to the Montgomery ranch, and before she could talk herself out of it, she kept walking, her feet crunching through the frozen snow. The ranch house was a mile outside town, and Clara's toes were numb by the time she reached it. It was even grander than she had imagined, a sprawling two-story structure with lights glowing warmly in the windows. She stood at the gate for a long moment, second-guessing herself, wondering if she was making a terrible mistake. Then the front door opened and Isaac stepped out, like he had been watching for her. Or maybe he just had the same restlessness she felt, the same inability to settle on this holy night. They stared at each other across the distance, and Clara saw the hope and fear warring on his face, the way he held himself still like he was afraid any movement would spook her. "Can we talk?" she called out, her voice carrying in the cold air. "Yes." Isaac hurried down the path, opening the gate for her. "Please come inside. You must be frozen." The house was warm and beautifully furnished, but Clara barely noticed the details. She let Isaac take her coat and lead her to a sitting room where a fire crackled in the hearth, then stood awkwardly by the mantel, trying to gather her thoughts. "I am sorry," Isaac said before she could speak. "I have said it before, but I need to say it again. I was wrong to lie to you. I was a coward and I hurt you because of my own fears and insecurities. There is no excuse for what I did." "No, there is not." Clara looked at him directly. "But I need to understand why, really why, not just that you wanted to be loved for yourself. I need to know what you were thinking, what you were afraid of." Isaac sank into a chair, looking older than his 27 years. "When my father died, I was 23. Suddenly, I had this fortune, this power, and people started treating me differently. Women who had never looked at me twice were suddenly interested. Men wanted to be my friend, wanted investment advice, wanted favors. I felt like I disappeared, like Isaac the person stopped mattering and only Montgomery the millionaire existed." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his own inability to articulate. "There was this one woman, Rebecca. We courted for 6 months and I thought she cared about me. Then I overheard her talking to her mother about what she would do with the Montgomery money once we were married, how she would redecorate the house, how she would finally be able to afford the lifestyle she deserved. She never mentioned me at all, except as a means to an end." Clara felt a pang of sympathy despite herself. "So when I heard about you, about the new schoolteacher from back east who had come here with nothing, I thought maybe this was my chance. Maybe I could meet someone who would see me clearly, without the money clouding everything." Isaac looked up at her, his eyes raw. "It started as self-protection, I think. But then I met you and you were so much more than I expected. Smart and kind and brave, and you looked at me like I mattered. Not my name or my wealth, just me. And I fell in love with you so fast it terrified me." "So you kept lying." Clara kept her voice steady. "I kept lying," he agreed. "Every time I tried to tell you, I would panic. What if you left? What if everything changed between us? What if you could not forgive me for deceiving you from the start? So I told myself I would wait, just a little longer, until you loved me enough that it would not matter. But it was selfish and stupid, and in the end I lost you anyway." Silence stretched between them. Clara stared into the fire, processing everything he had said. She could understand the fear, could even understand the initial deception. But months of lies, that was harder to forgive. "I told you about Thomas," she said finally. "About how he valued me only for what I could provide financially. And the whole time you were doing the same thing, just in reverse, testing me to see if I would pass your standards. You are right." Isaac did not try to defend himself. "I can see that now. At the time I told myself it was different, that I was protecting myself, but it was still a test. Still me deciding what you got to know and when. I took away your choice, and that was unforgivable. But you love me, Clara asked, needing to hear it directly. The real me, not some idealized version you built in your head. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. His voice broke on the words. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love the way you care about your students, the way you send money to your mother even when it leaves you with almost nothing. I love your laugh and your stubbornness, and the way you look at the sunrise like it is a gift. I love you, Clara Nichols, and I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you if you will let me. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks, and she did not try to stop them. I love you too. I have been so angry, so hurt, but I never stopped loving you. It has been the worst 3 months of my life. Mine too. Isaac stood, taking a tentative step toward her. Can you forgive me? Not right now, I understand it will take time, but eventually. Clara thought about it, really thought. What he had done was wrong, but it had come from a place of pain and fear rather than malice. He had not set out to hurt her, had in fact been trying to protect himself from being hurt. It was not an excuse, but it was an explanation, and maybe that was enough to build from. I think I can, she said slowly, but we have to start over. Honest this time, fully honest. No more secrets, no more tests. If we do this, it has to be as equals, with both of us choosing each other with open eyes. Yes. Isaac crossed the remaining distance between them, taking her hands carefully. I will tell you anything you want to know. Ask me anything. Are there other lies? Other things you have hidden? No, just my identity. Everything else I told you was true. My childhood, my parents, my dreams, all of it was real. He squeezed her hands gently. The man you fell in love with, he exists. He is just wealthier than you thought. Clara almost smiled at that. Significantly wealthier. Will that be a problem? I know you value independence. I do not know yet, Clara said honestly. I need to see your life, understand what it means to be with you, the real you in your real circumstances. And you need to understand that I will not just be some decoration on your arm. I have my own work, my own purpose. I would never ask you to give that up. Isaac lifted one of her hands and kissed it softly. I love that you are a teacher. I love that you are independent and strong-willed. I do not want to change you, Clara. I just want to be with you. They stood close, not quite embracing but not separate either, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. This was not the ending of their story, but maybe it was a new beginning. A chance to build something real and lasting, founded on truth rather than deception. It is Christmas, she said softly. Should we not have a little faith in each other in second chances? I would like that very much. Isaac smiled, and it was like sunrise after a long night, warm and full of promise. Merry Christmas, Clara. Merry Christmas, Isaac. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and Clara kissed him back, tasting salt from her tears and feeling the rightness of being in his arms again. There would be hard conversations ahead, trust to rebuild, a future to navigate together. But for now, on this holy night, there was forgiveness and love and hope that they could find their way back to each other. The winter passed slowly, but this time it was not painful. Clara and Isaac courted again, but differently now, with full honesty between them. He showed her the ranch, explained the business, introduced her to the employees who ran everything. She met his foreman Henry, who clearly adored Isaac and was fiercely protective of him. She saw where Isaac actually lived, the rooms he occupied versus the grand spaces he rarely used. It is too big for one person, he admitted, showing her through the house. My mother loved entertaining, loved filling these rooms with people. After she died, it has felt empty. What would you do if you could change it? Clara asked, looking at the formal dining room that could seat 24, make it a home instead of a monument. Isaac leaned against the doorframe, imagining. Fill it with family, with life. My parents wanted lots of children, but they only had me. I would like more than that if I am blessed enough." Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest at the image he painted. "How many children?" "As many as come. 3, 5, 8, I do not care. I just want a house full of noise and laughter and love." He looked at her carefully. "Is that something you want?" "Yes," Clara said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "I want a family. I want children to raise and love. I want what my parents had before my father died." They talked about everything over those winter months. Religion and politics, hopes and fears, the mundane details of daily life. Isaac learned that Clara hated pickles and loved chocolate, that she wanted to travel someday but was also deeply rooted to the people she loved. Clara learned that Isaac played piano but had not touched it since his mother died, that he read voraciously but felt guilty taking time away from work, that he struggled with the responsibility of the fortune, and sometimes wished he could just be a simple rancher without all the other complications. "You could be," Clara pointed out. "Hire managers for the business interests, focus on the ranch itself." "Would you still love me if I did that?" Isaac asked, only half joking. "I love you now with all of it. I would love you with less of it too." Clara took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "As long as you are happy, that is what matters to me." By February, the gossip in town had shifted from scandal to romance. People saw the way Isaac looked at Clara, the way he attended every school event and helped with every project. They saw the way Clara smiled at him, the softness that had returned to her expression. Bets were placed on when he would propose, and Martha Henderson started making pointed comments about spring weddings. Isaac knew he wanted to marry Clara, had known since before everything had fallen apart. But he wanted to do it right this time, wanted her to have no doubts about his intentions or his feelings. So he waited, courting her properly, giving her time to fully trust him again. It was Clara who brought it up first, on a warm March evening as they sat on his porch watching the sun set. "Do you still want to marry me?" Isaac turned to her, startled. "Of course I do. I have wanted that since last summer." "Then ask me." Clara met his eyes directly. "I am ready, Isaac. I trust you again. I love you. Ask me." He should have had a ring, should have planned something romantic, but Isaac found himself sliding off the porch chair and onto one knee right there, taking her hands in his. "Clara Nichols, you are the bravest, smartest, most wonderful woman I have ever known. You have forgiven me when I did not deserve it, loved me despite my flaws, and made me believe in the possibility of real partnership and true love. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me? Fill that big, empty house with family and laughter and all the love I have to give?" "Yes," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Isaac Montgomery, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply, feeling like his heart might burst from happiness. They had been through so much, had hurt each other and healed each other, had learned the hard way that love required honesty and trust and vulnerability. But they had survived it, and now they would build something beautiful together. The wedding was planned for May, after the school year ended. Clara wanted to finish her commitment to her students, wanted to see them through to summer before beginning her new life. She wrote to her mother with the news and received back a letter full of joy and relief. Her mother had worried about her in Idaho, so far from home and family, but knowing Clara had found love and happiness made it all worthwhile. She would travel to Boise for the wedding, bringing Clara's brother Joseph with her, and Clara cried when she read that, overwhelmed with gratitude that her small family would be there to witness her joy. Isaac insisted on paying for their travel and accommodations, and after a brief hesitation, Clara agreed. She was still learning to accept his wealth, still negotiating what it meant to be with someone who could casually afford things that would have been impossible for her. But she was also learning that accepting help was not the same as being bought, that Isaac's money was a tool he used generously, not a weapon or a test. "I want to keep teaching," she told him one evening as they discussed their future. "At least for a while. The children need consistency and I love the work. Then you should keep teaching." Isaac kissed her forehead. "This is your choice, Clara. You do not need my permission. I know, but we are building a life together. Your opinion matters to me." "My opinion is that you should do what makes you happy." He pulled her closer, content. "I fell in love with Clara the teacher. I do not want you to change just because you are marrying me." The school year ended with a celebration, and Clara's students presented her with a handmade quilt, each square embroidered with their names and drawings. She cried and hugged them all, promising she would be back in the fall, that she was not leaving them. Mrs. Montgomery, she would be, but still their teacher first. Her mother and Joseph arrived a week before the wedding, and Clara met them at the stagecoach with Isaac beside her. She had not seen them in over a year, and the reunion was tearful and joyful. Her mother was thinner than Clara remembered, gray threading more heavily through her hair, but her smile was the same. Joseph was taller, almost a man now at 17, and he looked around boys with the same wonder Clara had felt when she first arrived. "So this is the famous Isaac Montgomery," her mother said, looking him over frankly. "The man who broke my daughter's heart and then won it back." "Mother," Clara gasped, mortified. "It is all right," Isaac said, taking the assessment calmly. "She is not wrong. I did break Clara's heart, and I will spend the rest of my life making up for it." He looked Clara's mother in the eye. "I love your daughter, Mrs. Nichols. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I will do everything in my power to make her happy." Clara's mother studied him for another long moment, then nodded. "See that you do. She has had enough heartbreak." The wedding was held in the church where Clara and Isaac had attended services together, where they had sat in separate pews during the months they were apart, each acutely aware of the other's presence. Now they stood at the altar together, Clara in a simple white dress that Isaac had insisted on buying, Isaac in a fine suit that made him look every inch the wealthy rancher he was. But when Clara looked at him, she did not see the money or the status. She just saw Isaac, the man who had walked with her at sunrise, who had listened to her dreams, who had loved her enough to let her go and then fought to win her back. The Reverend spoke about commitment and forgiveness, about building a life together through joy and sorrow, and Clara and Isaac promised to love each other in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, as long as they both should live. When Isaac kissed her, sealing their vows, Clara felt complete in a way she never had before. This was right. This was home. The reception was held at the Montgomery ranch, and it seemed like the entire town came to celebrate. There was music and dancing, food and drink, and Clara moved through it all in a daze of happiness. Her mother caught her hand at one point and pulled her aside. "Are you happy, truly?" she asked, searching Clara's face. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Clara said honestly. "I know it has been complicated, but Isaac is a good man, Mother. He loves me and I love him. Then that is all that matters." Her mother hugged her tightly. "Your father would be so proud of you, darling. You have grown into such a strong woman." The words made Clara cry again, happy tears this time, and she held her mother close, grateful beyond measure that she was here to witness this day. As the sun set and the party continued, Isaac pulled Clara aside, leading her up to the porch of the main house where they could watch the celebration from a distance. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, deliriously. Clara leaned back against his chest, feeling safe and loved. "I cannot believe this is real, that I get to spend the rest of my life with you. Believe it." Isaac kissed her temple. "You are stuck with me now, Mrs. Montgomery." The name sent a thrill through her. Mrs. Montgomery, Clara Montgomery. It would take some getting used to, but she liked the sound of it, liked the way it tied her to Isaac irrevocably. They stayed there for a long time, wrapped in each other, watching their friends and family celebrate below. And Clara thought about all the twists and turns that had brought her here, the pain and betrayal that had almost destroyed them, the forgiveness and love that had saved them. She had come to Idaho broken and alone, looking to disappear into the vast western sky. Instead, she had found herself, found her purpose, found a love that was real and deep and lasting. The months that followed were an adjustment. Clara moved into the big ranch house and tried to make it feel like home, adding small touches here and there, filling the rooms with flowers and books and life. She continued teaching, riding into town 3 days a week, and spent the other days managing the household and learning about the ranch operations. Isaac had been right that it was too big for one person, but with two it felt more manageable, and Clara found she enjoyed the space, the possibility of it. They fell into routines together: morning coffee on the porch, evening walks around the property, quiet nights reading by the fire. Isaac taught Clara to ride properly, and she taught him to dance better, and they learned to navigate the small compromises and adjustments that made up married life. There were arguments occasionally, usually about money and Clara's stubborn independence, but they learned to fight fair and always made up before bed. By autumn, Clara began to feel different, a new awareness of her body that made her suspect what might be happening. She waited until she was certain before telling Isaac, pulling him aside after dinner one evening. "I have news," she said, watching his face carefully. "Good news or bad news? That depends on your perspective, I suppose." Clara took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." Isaac's expression went through shock, disbelief, and then pure joy in rapid succession. "Really? Are you certain as I can be? I have missed my courses for 2 months, and I have been ill in the mornings." Clara smiled at his dazed expression. "You are going to be a father, Isaac." He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. Then he set her down carefully, like she was made of glass, and dropped to his knees, pressing his face to her stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I am your father, and I am already so in love with you." Clara ran her fingers through his hair, her heart full to bursting. This was what she had dreamed of, what she had thought she had lost forever when Thomas had chosen her cousin. But here she was, loved and cherished and carrying the child of a man who would move mountains for her. "Are you happy?" she asked. Isaac looked up at her, tears shining in his eyes. "I have never been happier in my entire life." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Clara had to stop teaching in the final months when she could no longer comfortably make the ride into town. She missed her students and the work, but she threw herself into preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and arranging the nursery with help from Mrs. Talbot and Martha Henderson, and the other women of Boise who had become her friends. Isaac was hovering and overprotective, worrying constantly about her health, but Clara found it endearing rather than annoying. He would talk to her belly every night, telling their child stories about the ranch and the mountains, singing the lullabies his mother had sung to him. And Clara would watch him and think about how far they had come, how close they had been to losing each other forever. Their daughter was born on a warm day in May, exactly 2 years after the wedding. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Clara thought she could not continue. But Isaac was with her the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her face and telling her how strong she was, how brave, how much he loved her. When the baby finally came, screaming and red-faced and perfect, Clara cried with relief and joy and exhaustion. The doctor placed the baby on her chest, and Clara looked down at the tiny face, the dark hair already thick and wild, the eyes that would eventually turn the same warm brown as Isaac's. "She is beautiful," Isaac said, his voice choked with emotion. "You are both so beautiful." They named her Eleanor after Isaac's mother, with the middle name Rose after Clara's grandmother. Little Eleanor Montgomery, heir to the Montgomery fortune and already deeply loved by parents who had fought their way through darkness to find each other. The years that followed brought more children, 3 more in total, until the big house was indeed filled with noise and laughter and love just as Isaac had dreamed. There was Thomas, named for Isaac's father, born when Eleanor was 2. Then the twins, Margaret and Catherine, who arrived when Eleanor was 5 and immediately became the terrors of the ranch. Clara eventually stopped teaching full-time, though she continued to tutor children on the ranch and stayed involved with the school board. She found she loved being a mother even more than she had expected, loved the chaos and joy of raising children in this wide-open country. Isaac was a devoted father, patient and playful, teaching the children to ride and rope and love the land as much as he did. They had hard times too. The ranch went through a drought that nearly broke them financially, and they lost several close friends to illness and accidents over the years. But they faced it all together, their love a constant foundation that held them steady through the storms. On their 10th anniversary, Isaac took Clara back to the spot where they had first met, that corner by the schoolhouse where he had approached her as a stranger in worn clothes. The old schoolhouse was gone now, replaced by a larger building to accommodate the growing town, but the memories remained. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked, holding her hand. "Saying yes to me before you knew the truth?" Clara thought about it seriously, looking back over the years. "No," she said finally. "I think I fell in love with the real you, regardless of the circumstances. The money complicated things, made me doubt and question, but at the core, you were always yourself with me. Honest about what mattered, even when you were lying about your name." "I should have told you from the start." "Probably," Clara agreed. "But then we would not have had those morning walks, that time when it was just us with no expectations or complications. I treasure those memories, Isaac. They showed me who you really are." He pulled her close, kissing her softly. "I love you, Clara Montgomery. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I love you too, and thank you for being worth it." They stood together in the fading light, 2 people who had found each other against the odds, who had built a life and family from love and forgiveness and stubborn determination. The mountains rose around them, eternal and beautiful, and Clara thought about that first morning when she had stood looking at all that space and wondered if she could disappear into it. She had disappeared in a way. The girl who had left Philadelphia broken and alone was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own strength, who had learned to trust again, who had built a home in this wild place. She had disappeared into the vast western sky and found herself on the other side, loved and whole and exactly where she was meant to be. Years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Eleanor grew into a thoughtful young woman who loved books as much as her mother, while Thomas showed his father's head for business and dedication to the ranch. The twins were wild and adventurous, always getting into mischief, but with hearts as big as the Idaho sky. Clara and Isaac watched their children grow with pride and wonder, grateful for every moment. The town of Boise grew too, evolving from a rough frontier settlement into a thriving community. Clara's influence was felt everywhere, in the improved schools and libraries, in the programs for women and children. Isaac used the Montgomery fortune wisely, investing in businesses and infrastructure that helped everyone, not just himself. Together they became pillars of the community, respected and loved for their generosity and genuine care for others. On their 20th anniversary, Isaac surprised Clara with a trip, just the two of them, leaving the children with Clara's mother who had moved to Boise several years earlier to be closer to her grandchildren. They traveled to San Francisco, staying in a grand hotel and seeing the sights, but Clara found she was homesick for Idaho within days. "I thought I wanted to see the world," she told Isaac as they stood looking out at the Pacific Ocean. "But all I really want is to go home." "Then we will go home," Isaac said simply. "I feel the same way. Nothing out here compares to what we have built together." They returned to the ranch and to their children, and Clara felt complete again, surrounded by the people and places she loved most. She had come so far from that heartbroken girl on the stagecoach, had built a life richer than anything she could have imagined. And it had all started with a decision to say yes to a man in worn clothes, to trust her heart despite her fears. When Millionaire turned 18 and began receiving proposals from young men across the territory, Clara sat her down for a long conversation about love and marriage and choosing wisely. "How did you know father was the right one?" Millionaire asked. "Even after everything that happened, how did you know you could trust him?" Clara thought about it carefully. "I did not know, not with certainty. But I knew that we loved each other, really loved each other, and that he was willing to be honest and vulnerable with me even when it was difficult. I knew that he saw me as an equal, that he valued my mind and my independence. And I knew that when things got hard, we worked through it together instead of running away." "Were you scared?" "Terrified," Clara admitted. "I had been hurt before, and I knew I could be hurt again. But I decided that the possibility of real love was worth the risk, and I was right." Millionaire hugged her tightly. "I hope I find what you and father have." "I hope you do too, darling. Just make sure whoever you choose loves you for exactly who you are, not who they want you to be." The years continued to unfold in a tapestry of moments big and small. Graduations and weddings, births and deaths, triumphs and struggles. Clara and Isaac grew older together, their love deepening and maturing like fine wine. On their 30th anniversary, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, they renewed their vows in the same church where they had first married. "30 years ago, I made you a promise," Isaac said, holding Clara's hands as they stood before the assembled crowd. "I promised to love you in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both should live. Today I make that promise again, with even more conviction than before. You have been my partner, my best friend, my greatest love. Every day with you has been a gift." Clara felt tears slide down her face as she spoke her own vows. "You once asked me if I regretted saying yes before I knew the truth. The answer is no, then and now and always. Because the truth is this: I love you, Isaac Montgomery. I love you in your strength and your vulnerability, your wisdom and your mistakes, your wealth and your generosity. You are the best man I have ever known, and I am grateful every day that you chose me." They kissed as their family applauded, and Clara thought about all the lives that had been touched by their love. Millionaire was married now with 2 children of her own. Thomas was running the ranch alongside his father, proving to be a natural leader. The twins had just finished school and were full of plans and dreams. And there were grandchildren, 5 so far, with more surely to come. The Montgomery fortune had grown over the years, but it had been used well, funding schools and hospitals, helping families in need, building up the community. Isaac had learned to wield his wealth as a tool for good rather than a barrier between himself and others. And Clara had learned that accepting help was not weakness, that love could exist alongside financial disparity as long as there was respect and equality in the ways that mattered. As they grew older still, Isaac's health began to fail. Nothing dramatic at first, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for over 6 decades. Clara cared for him with the same devotion he had shown her through 4 pregnancies and countless illnesses over the years. They spent long afternoons on the porch, watching the mountains and reminiscing about their life together. "You remember that first morning walk?" Isaac asked one day, his voice weaker than it once had been but still warm with love. "Every detail," Clara said, holding his hand. "You wore that faded blue shirt and you were so nervous. You almost turned around 3 times before you worked up the courage to speak to me." "I saw my whole future in that moment," Isaac said. "I looked at you watching that hawk and I just knew you were going to change everything." "We changed each other," Clara corrected gently. "That is what love does. It transforms us into better versions of ourselves." Isaac lived to see his 75th birthday, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. He passed peacefully in his sleep, with Clara beside him, their fingers intertwined as they had been for over 50 years. The grief was sharp and terrible, but Clara found comfort in the life they had built, the love that remained even after death. She continued on for several more years, a beloved matriarch who told stories of the old days, who taught her grandchildren and great-grandchildren about strength and forgiveness and the courage it took to love fully. She never remarried, never even considered it. Isaac had been her one great love, the man who had worn rags to court her, who had hidden his fortune to find the truth of her heart. And she had said yes before she knew the truth, had chosen him based on who he was rather than what he had. It had been the right choice, the best choice, one that had given her a life richer than any amount of money could buy. When Clara finally passed at the age of 87, she was laid to rest beside Isaac in the small cemetery overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their children and grandchildren gathered to remember them, to tell stories of their legendary love, to pass on the lessons they had learned. Eleanor, now gray-haired herself with grandchildren of her own, stood at the graveside and spoke of her parents. "They taught us that love is a choice you make every day, that honesty and trust are the foundation of any real relationship, that wealth means nothing without generosity, and that family is everything." She looked out at the assembled crowd, 3 generations strong. They built all of this from love and determination and a willingness to forgive. We honor them best by living the same way. The sun set over the Idaho mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the same colors Clara had loved that first morning when she met a stranger in worn clothes and decided to take a chance. The same colors that had witnessed their courtship and their struggles, their wedding and their children, their long and happy life together. In Boise, the schoolhouse that Isaac had rebuilt still stood, though it had been added onto and modernized over the years. A plaque by the door read, "The Montgomery School, founded by Isaac and Clara Montgomery, who believed education could change lives." Students pass through its doors every day, learning and growing, some of them descendants of that first class Clara had taught so many years ago. The Montgomery Ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's leadership, and eventually under his children's leadership, a testimony to what could be built with hard work and love and vision. The fortune that had once seemed like such a barrier between Isaac and the world became a tool for good in the hands of his descendants, used to lift up rather than divide. And in the town, Old-timers would sometimes tell the story of the millionaire cowboy who had worn rags to court the new schoolteacher. How she had said yes before she knew the truth, and how their love had become the stuff of legend. It was told as a romantic tale, a reminder that true love could overcome any obstacle, that honesty and forgiveness were more valuable than gold. But more than that, it was a story about courage. The courage to be vulnerable, to trust again after being hurt, to choose love even when it was frightening. Clara had shown that courage when she forgave Isaac, when she gave him a second chance despite the pain he had caused. Isaac had shown it when he finally told the truth, when he risked losing everything to be fully known. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a legacy that extended far beyond money or property. They had built a family founded on love, a community strengthened by generosity, a story that would be told for generations as an example of what was possible when two people chose each other fully and completely. The mountains stood eternal, watching over the land that Clara and Isaac had called home, bearing silent witness to all the lives that had been touched by their love. And somewhere in the vastness of that big Idaho sky, two souls rested together at last, their story complete, their love enduring forever in the hearts of those they had left behind. It was, in the end, exactly the life Clara had dreamed of that first morning when Isaac had asked what she wanted. To be known, really known and loved anyway. She had found that and more, had built a happiness so complete it seemed almost impossible looking back. But it had been real, every moment of it, from the painful beginning to the joyful middle to the peaceful end. The millionaire cowboy had worn rags to court her, and she had said yes before she knew the truth. It had been the beginning of everything, the first step in a journey that had transformed them both. And standing at the end of it all, looking back over the years, Clara would have changed nothing. The pain had been necessary, the deception a crucible that had forged them into something stronger than they could have been alone. Love was never simple, never easy, but it was always, always worth it. That was the truth Clara and Isaac had discovered together, the truth they had lived every day of their long and happy marriage. And it was a truth that echoed through the generations, carried on by children and grandchildren who had witnessed their example and learned from it. In the end, that was the greatest legacy of all. Not the fortune or the ranch or even the family, though all of those were precious. The greatest legacy was the love itself, the proof that two broken people could find each other, heal each other, and build a life more beautiful than either had imagined possible. And so the story ended as all the best stories do, with love triumphant and lives well lived, with family gathered close and memories that would never fade, with the mountains watching over it all in silent approval. Clara and Isaac Montgomery had lived and loved and left the world better than they found it. What more could anyone ask of a life than that?